Very warm welcome to this first GCHU public seminar of the academic year. My name's Juliette Carpenter. I'm a research fellow at the Global Centre on Healthcare and Urbanisation, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's seminar on the theme, What Creates Healthy Cities? So the GCHU was created in 2019, very much born out of the interests here at Kellogg, combining the research and teaching around health and evidence-based healthcare and sustainable urban development. And these two themes were brought together in the creation of the Commission on Creating Healthy Cities, which was an initiative led by Kellogg College, together with the Prince's Foundation, partly as a response to the pandemic, thinking about how cities can contribute to health within the urban area. And thinking about building out of the pandemic and how cities can contribute to that. Fast forward 18 months, and we launched our report this summer on what creates healthy cities. I think you have a copy on your seat today, with some 20 recommendations to urban policymakers, urban leaders, and citizens on how to create healthy cities. And we're delighted to be joined here today by a panel of speakers from a range of backgrounds, to answer the question from their own perspective on what creates healthy cities. So the format is going to be that each speaker will talk for 5 minutes or so, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. So if you could leave your questions to the end of the 4 presentations, and then we'll get a discussion going from the floor. And at the end of the seminar, there'll be drinks, so you're welcome to continue the discussion and debate over a drink at the back of the room. So do join us for that. So without further ado, I think as Lord Best isn't here, we'll go straight on to Dr. Stephanie Tierney, who is a health services researcher at the Nuffield Department of Primary Care here at the university. And she focuses on social prescribing, which is something that we highlight in our report as really important in terms of creating healthy cities.
Thanks, Juliette. So as Juliette says, I'm here today to talk about social prescribing, which is an area of research that I've been looking at for the past 4 years now. And also, as Juliette mentioned, it's something that's referred to in the report that the Commission on Creating Healthy Cities produced. A little bit of background then to social prescribing. We know that people often go to see their GP with problems that are maybe non-medical in nature. Things like loneliness, housing problems, debt. And these problems can have a significant impact on people's health and well-being. And people will go to the GP with these problems because they're not really sure where else to turn, and they're familiar with their GP and the GP surgery. But the GP may not be the best person able to support with these non-medical issues. And that's where social prescribing fits in. Social prescribing then is about supporting people with problems, as I say, that are non-medical, things that might be environmental, say housing problems, social loneliness, or economic, things like financial worries. And what it involves is drawing on things that are in the community or within a city that are already there in existence, often things in the voluntary and community sector. The sorts of things that I've listed on the slide here, so things like parks, community groups, volunteering, they all form part of social prescribing. And in terms of social prescribing, link workers or social prescribers are key, and these individuals are employed often to work in GP practices. And how it tends to work is that a GP might have a consultation with a patient and pick up that that person has non-medical issues that might be supported by social prescribing. So that GP might then say to the patient, you might benefit from speaking to somebody called a link worker who's attached to our practice. Would you like me to refer you? And if the patient agrees, the link worker will then see that patient. What the link worker is able to do with the patient is, first of all, they have time to talk to the patient. Often they'll see them for about 45 minutes on their first appointment, and they'll tend to see them on more than one occasion. And what they try to do is find out not what's the matter with the patient, but what matters to that patient. So really finding out what would make that patient's circumstances, situation better. How can they change their current situation? And together, the link worker and the patient develop an action plan to think about, these are the challenges, the issues that the patient is facing, what's in the community that might be sort of appropriate to help with those non-medical needs of the patient. And then the link worker will connect the patient to things in the community that might help with their non-medical needs. So we talk about a social prescribing pathway. You've got the person, the patient with a non-medical need. They're often then seen by a referrer, tends to be a GP in most cases, and then the referrer refers to the link worker. The link worker, as I mentioned, has that time to really get to know the patient, what their problems are, and then connects them to support things in the community that might assist them. We're doing some research at the moment where we've got researchers spending 3 weeks with link workers in different parts of the country. So they're observing what link workers are doing and talking to people that link workers work with. And what this has shown is that link workers deal with a whole raft of different non-medical problems and help people with a range of different non-medical problems. So it could be that they have anxiety, low mood, they might have had a bereavement recently, they might be experience loneliness. It could be to do with finances, where they need help with debt management or financial sort of benefits. It could be things to do with housing or even hoarding, link workers have helped with, domestic violence, and also food poverty. So what the link workers will do, they won't sort of sort these problems out themselves, but they'll think about what's in the community that we could then refer these people onto for help with whatever their non-medical needs are. So link workers need a range of things that they know about in the local community that they can refer people onto. And social prescribing, link workers might refer people onto things like citizens' advice for advice on, say, debt and benefits. They might refer them on to cultural sector organisations where people might get involved in cultural activities that from half an hour sort of distracts them from their worries in life. They might recommend that people get involved in a gardening group, gets them outside, gets them doing something active. It could be that the link worker recommends they get involved in volunteering opportunities where they can feel they've got more of a purpose in life and also they're meeting people. Luncheon clubs, befriending services also are things that link workers refer people to, or sometimes various exercise groups. So it's really diverse what link workers will refer people to as part of social prescribing. The link worker role then is about connecting people to things in their community, in their city, and also making connections with things that are in the community or the city. So finding out what's available locally that they can connect people to. And I'm just going to finish by highlighting some of the potential challenges that might be associated with social prescribing. So one is that need for link workers to have a range of things, community assets we call them, groups, organisations that they can refer people onto. Because we're all unique and we all have different non-medical needs, the link workers need a range of things that they could refer people onto. A thing that's come up in our research is the issue of transport. So if people don't live near to public transport, it can be difficult to get to some community groups, activities, events. The link workers themselves need to keep up to date with what's available currently in the local area. Who's running it? Is it still running? Is it still taking place on the same day this week? Public as well. I don't think many people will have a good grasp of what social prescribing is. So they might go to see the link worker without really knowing what social prescribing is about. They might come with preconceptions or not really knowing what to expect. And then a key thing for link workers is trying to encourage people to take risks, try things that are outside their comfort zone, make connections with other people, go to things, activities. So part of it is motivating people to try things. That's all I wanted to say about social prescribing. But if you are interested in reading a bit more about the different research we're doing on this project or on this area, that's a link to our website that contains a range of different projects we're involved in at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Stephanie. That's really fascinating insights into social prescribing as an alternative way of addressing some of the health and wellbeing issues that faced in cities. I wonder if, Lord Best, if you'd like to come and take the floor and just give us an introduction to the report on creating healthy cities.
And you're going to do some of the detailed stuff, are you, after me, Juliet? I don't want to tread on your toes, especially as I'm so late.
Just a 5-minute introduction to the report. So Lord Best is a crossbench peer in the House of Lords and was chair of the Commission on Creating Healthy Cities. So chaired the whole process over the 18 months, brought together the stakeholders and steered the whole process to its finality in the report, and everyone has a copy of the report today. So,
excellent.
So people have been leafing through it, I think.
Already having a sneaky look, yeah. And so sorry to be late, but what a bonus to hear all about social prescribing, which we do give some coverage to in our report. And there are links between the physical environment and social prescribing. Sometimes people are prescribed things that are to do with the outside world, as well as all those other ways in which social prescribing can make such a huge difference. Well, our report is about placemaking and its links to health. And what we're saying to Teresa Coffey, the new Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, we're saying think health, think place. Think about the environment in which people are living, working, traveling. Think about that, because the causes of a lot of ill health will be to do with the place in which people are living and where they're situated. I was asked the other night to give my top tips from our excellent report. Jonathan Mickey is here, the president of Kellogg College, and he steered our group. Juliet was the chief research fellow, postdoctorate research fellow who looked after us. We had a amazingly talented group of commissioners who looked at all of the issues. We've come up with this report, which I hope you will take away. You haven't quite got time to glance at it now. It's well worth dipping in and out of. I found that it's like one of those books when you don't have to begin at the beginning and get to the end. You can just go in and out. There's lots of juicy bits all through it. I hope you're going to enjoy that. We also got a toolkit, still in preparation, still working through, looking at all of the research that's been done by everybody else and distilling it into an evidence bank, the things that really work. What works? Here's the answer, under all the different headings and all the different ways in which the physical environment meets up with health issues. And Juliet's responsible now for taking that forward. And we also gave a little guide to using local data. There's an enormous amount of data that is mostly unused by local authorities, by health trusts, by practitioners in the big world out there. We now have a mass of data that you can plug into and use, and we give a little guide to how that might be useful to policymakers in the placemaking world and in the health world. So this is the product that we have assembled, and I'm just going to spend the rest of my 5 minutes, oh dear, giving you some of my top items, the really good bits that I think came out of this. If we want the biggest bang for our buck in the ways in which the built environment can make health better, can influence health for the better. So my first one is about, of course, it is about housing. It's about getting enough homes, enough affordable homes. What would make the most difference to achieving the number of homes that we need and the quality of homes that we need in the future? What one thing, come on, I'm asked, I'm provoked to answering, what one thing would make the biggest difference? And the biggest difference, I think, is getting hold of the land. It is about land. What we have done with our planning system is hand over to the private developer, the volume house builders. They are the ones that do all of the development in the UK. It is there that 80% of all housing is in the hands of about 6 house building firms. We have handed over development to these big players. These do not necessarily have the public interest as their highest priority. And what we need to do, and we followed the recommendations of Sir Oliver Letwin, a conservative in the Cabinet Office who produced a Letwin review on how we would get enough homes built, enough homes that would be sustainable, will improve people's health. And he said, what you need to do is get each local authority to set up a development corporation, use compulsory purchase powers if necessary, and acquire the land. Once you've got the land, everything else is going to fall into place. But it's what the house builder does is get hold of the land, and then they're in charge. Then all those promises that were going to be lots of affordable housing, lots of green space, lots of amenity, suddenly they evaporate, they disappear. It's the owner of the land that counts. So Oliver said, get hold of the land, have a development corporation that buys the land. This is how we built the new towns in the past. And then have a master plan. Have a bit of housing for older people, have housing for students, you parcel it up, but do it on the terms that will be good for the community at large, and not for a handful of house builders. So my first one is get hold of the land. Second one, in terms of the existing stock of homes in this country, which can create incredible misery, and indeed, if they're cold and damp, all kinds of problems of ill health. Bad housing is really bad for health. So Michael Marmot, who writes on health inequalities, puts housing conditions at the top of the reasons for health inequalities. Housing and health just going together there. How do we get these homes improved? What would make the biggest difference? What's my one big one for that? Well, I think it'd be a great idea if we had a national strategy for retrofitting our older housing. This is needed for climate change reasons. It's needed for fuel poverty reasons. We need to much improve energy efficiency, but we also need to retrofit and get loads of homes up to scratch. We need a strategy to do that. And I think the core elements of the strategy would be for owner-occupiers having these things called home improvement agencies. I hope some of you have heard of home improvement agencies, because they're wonderful things and they're very small and under-resourced, but they provide the advice and guidance to owner-occupiers, often elderly people, to try and get their homes done up, use the grants that are available. Who can struggle through, if you're a pensioner somewhere, and getting your house brought up to standard, getting a disability disabled facilities grant? Who can do it? You need a home improvement agency. And for the private rented sector, which is where we have the worst properties, the least well managed and the least secure homes, what we need to do is acquire properties, street properties, from private landlords who are failing us. We now have a list of the properties that are not satisfactory in terms of energy efficiency. They each have to have an EPC rating, and every property that is let has to have an EPC rating that is above band E and above. Now, this is boring technical stuff, but it means that there is a list in every area. There is one here for Oxford of every property that has failed to get, and it should not be being let. It's illegal to let it. But local authorities don't have the resources, they don't have the cash to do something about the problem. If they simply tell the landlord they've got to do something, the landlord does nothing. There's nothing much that can be done. We need to head in there and acquire those properties, changing their tenure from being privately rented to being socially rented. We want community organizations and housing associations to acquire those houses, modernize them, and make them places that are really with secure tenancies and affordable rents. And a fund to do that can have a disproportionate impact on the whole neighborhood. Pick out a few houses in an area that are rubbish and get them up to standard, and you will improve the whole area, because people can see that there's investment, there's things going on, you're changing the area. This is what levelling up should be about. There's lots of levelling up resources. How well is it going to be spent? We say create a national housing conversion fund to buy a lot of those privately rented properties. Am I allowed another one of these plums? No. So Juliet's going to crack on with the next, a very quick one. Well, I think my third and final one, I was going to do reduce car dependency. Can I leave that one to you? Reduce car dependency does so many good things, and changes that epidemic of obesity into people wheeling and walking, and lifestyles being changed. Won't do that one. Very briefly, retirement housing. You get such a big bang for your buck if you invest in retirement housing for people who are in totally unsatisfactory accommodation and who are lonely and detached from the rest of society, bereaved or whatever. If we can get retirement housing, we move people out of family-sized houses, freeing them up for the next generation, giving you 2 for 1, saving the NHS the kind of burden that it currently faces, which is getting progressively worse. We're seeing the NHS almost on its knees already and in danger of getting on its knees in the future if we don't go upstream and prevent health issues coming downstream by getting people into the accommodation that they really need. I've run out of time. But anyway, there will now be a fantastic presentation from Juliet. Thank you very much.
So thanks very much for that. To hear your headlines of the 20 recommendations in the report, you'll see. Great to hear what you feel are the ones that are really top of your priority list. I'd now like to invite Julia Thrift, please, to come and speak. Julia works at the Town and Country Planning Association, TCPA, as the Director on healthier placemaking. Very much a theme of the report. So, Julia, thank you.
Do I speak into this?
Yes, I think that's right.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. I would really like to recommend the report very highly. The TCPA, the organisation I work for, contributed some evidence, and we've been really impressed by the report that Lord Best and the team have produced. Right, so here we go. So the question was how to create healthy cities. And I thought we'd start with what creates healthy people. We often assume that it's the NHS that helps us stay healthy, that, when you think, why are we healthy? We're healthy because of the NHS. But all the evidence suggests that the NHS is really good at fixing us when things go wrong, but it's not actually what keeps us healthy in the first place. So if we want people to stay healthy and to stay out of the NHS, the things that really contribute to people's health are the homes and the neighbourhoods and the communities in which they live, as Lord Best has talked about earlier. So the round diagram on the screen shows the things that influence people's health. Right in the middle, you've got the things that you can't change, like how old people are, whether they're male or female, their genetic makeup. Those are things that can't be changed. But other things that influence health are environmental things that can be changed for better or for worse. So the places where we live have a big impact on our lifestyle. If we live somewhere where the only way to get to the shops, to the school, to work is to drive, then we'll drive, and we won't get that everyday, day-to-day activity of walking and cycling that helps keep people healthy. The communities we live in are hugely important. I think we all realised during lockdown how much we value those informal chats we have with neighbours, with people in shops, with people out and about. When we were all stuck in our homes, we missed that day-to-day conversation. Having people nearby, whether it's friends or family or neighbours, who you talk to, who you can turn to if there's an emergency, who are encouraging, who will say to you, oh, you don't look very well today, is there a problem? That sort of informal community support is incredibly valuable for health. The local economy, are there jobs nearby? Are there, does the local economy provide things that people need? Are there local markets you can go to get cheap food? Things like that are really important too, as are the activities. If there's a nice park down the road, you're likely to go out there, you're likely to go for a walk. All of that's really good for your health. Being able to see trees from the window is good for your health, measurably good for your health. And going to green spaces is obviously good for physical health, but in fact the evidence shows it's incredibly good for our mental health as well. So I won't go on, but the point I'm making is that the places where we live and the communities in which we live are one of the biggest influences on whether or not we're healthy. So when we think about creating healthier places, we need to think about the people who have the least choice. Now, during lockdown, I was really conscious that within a mile of where I lived, there were these two different blocks of flats. There were the flats above the local shop, the mini market, in a busy road with air pollution, lots of cheap junk food nearby, and no trees to look out from the window. quite likely to be overcrowded, I suspect. And a mile in the other direction, there were these brand new flats that have been built overlooking a green space. And the experience of people during lockdown living in those two different situations must have been hugely different and had very different impacts on their health and well-being. People who have choices will move to places that tend to support health. That is a bit of a generalisation. By choices, I mean not just money, although money is hugely important. Can you afford a good home? But it's also things like education. It's your physical and mental health. If somebody is going through a mental health crisis, they're not going to be able to have much choice about where they live. It's also about friends and family and the support you get. People help, we help each other. So people with choices tend to move to healthier places. The people with the least choice get stuck in the worst places. And the people with the least choice often have the worst health to begin with. So that disparity in places, the places with good homes, with nice streets that are attractive to walk down, with good parks around the corner, they will support good health. The people who move there will tend to have better health. It will be easier to live a healthy life. But the people who have less choice will be stuck in the least healthy places. So if we want to create a healthier society and to create healthier cities, we need to focus our efforts on making sure that everyone is able to live in a healthier place. And that means really focusing on the needs of the people with least choice. So as Lord Best mentioned, that means that people with the least choice should be prioritised for good homes. Because if you're stuck in a home that's damp, that's next to the main road with air pollution, miles away from any affordable good food, your health will deteriorate. So as we move forward, as we think about placemaking, as we think about prioritisation, and as Sir Michael Marmot has said in all of his work about reducing health inequalities, we need to create places that are good for everybody's health, but we really need to focus our efforts on making sure that the people with less choice are able to live in places where it's easy to live a healthy life. Oh, I'll go back. Finally, a little bit about the TCPA, which is the organisation I work for. Our vision is that everyone should have a good home in a good neighbourhood where everyone can thrive. So that's pretty much what we've been talking about and very much what the report talks about. If you look at our website, there's a link on the bottom of that page. Sorry, it's so small, but it's there. We've got lots of free resources to help communities and councils create healthier places. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Julian. Such a critical aspect of this whole debate is health inequalities in cities, and I think it's really important to highlight that. Now I'd like, last but not least, certainly, to invite Councillor Susan Brown. I don't know if you want to come and take the floor here. Councillor Brown is leader of Oxford City Council, leader of the Labour group, and also chair of the cabinet, head of the cabinet on economic partnerships. Yeah.
That's right. Thank you. And for full disclosure, I should also say I work at Oxford University Hospitals as head of communications there. So I have a foot in both camps, as it were. And I really welcome this report. I think it's excellent, and I feel like the case study now of how this might work and how we're trying to make it work in Oxford City. It's really good to have this opportunity from the city that is in fact home to the Commission. And by the way, the ward that I represent on the City Council is called Churchill Ward, and it's called Churchill Ward after the Churchill Hospital that sits within it. So, again, I feel that there is a sort of little connection there. And Oxford is actually an excellent case study in both the challenges that the city faces in creating healthy places, but also, I hope, in terms of what we can do to address them. So Oxford often tops leagues, and people will be familiar with, the fact that we have a best medical school in the world, which is fantastic. But we also top the annual Good Growth Index, which measures against well-being such as access to jobs, income, health, skills, and work-life balance. And we have great health assets, including our hospitals, world-leading health and biomedical research. We have great outdoor green spaces and a walkable, cyclable geography. We are a relatively small city. But we also top leagues that we are less happy to be top of. So we have very much the unwanted position of being the second most unequal city in the UK, second to Cambridge. It's one time where I'm very happy for Cambridge to beat us. And almost a third of children in our city are growing up in poverty, which is not a statistic that we are proud of at all. It's quite shameful. It's also the second least affordable place to buy or rent a house in the UK. This time we're second to Winchester. And so, it is ironic as well that in Oxford, which is a globally renowned seat of education, educational attainment in our state schools is below the national average. And the gap in healthy life expectancy between the wealthiest and poorest parts of the city is a completely shameful 16 years. And that's an awfully long time. That is a really big gap. And this inequality is driving the overall fall in healthy life expectancy. And all these factors congregate in the most deprived areas of our city, and they all have an impact on the health of our communities. So I can only amplify the message in the report that social inequalities and deprivation are intrinsically linked to health outcomes, and we, working as a whole city and with the right national policies, needs to tackle these systemic and deeply ingrained inequalities if we're to create a truly healthy city. The Commission's recommendations identify critical areas for action, and they are all areas on which we focus in Oxford and in the City Council. Given that the report recognises the correlation between social and health inequalities, one I would add is developing a more inclusive economy. So, this is my area of on the Cabinet in the City. And it's a key driver in our new economic strategy for the city. And it's one that's focused on seeking to connect people with the new opportunities and to build and to retain wealth in our more deprived neighbourhoods, making sure that we are sharing out that equality of wealth that we are growing in our city with those that have least of it. And we're supporting the creation of the Oxfordshire Inclusive Economy Partnership, bringing together key partners, including the universities, business and community groups, to identify actions that we can take together to make sure that our still powerful local economy benefits more local people. And our new local plan, which we're currently consulting on, places a really strong emphasis on the concept of a 15-minute neighbourhood, a city plan so that people can meet most, if not all of their needs within a short walk, using public transport or a short bike ride from their home to help them live a fulfilling and healthy life within their local area. And we are really proud in our city of the green lungs, as we call them, that we have across our city, which is green spaces that are in easy walking distance of most people's homes. I completely agree and really thoroughly welcome the emphasis that the Commission has placed on housing, and indeed Lord Best spoke very strongly about that earlier. And in a city with the highest proportion of its residents, another poll that we're top of, we have the highest proportion of local residents in the country who live in the private rented sector. It's 50% of our local citizens live in the private rented sector, which is huge. So access to an affordable, decent and secure home is a major, major factor in physical and mental well-being, as has already been discussed, as well as a determinant of so many other outcomes in life. And I think the one thing that I didn't hear mentioned very specifically earlier was the impact of overcrowding on health and all sorts of other health and well-being outcomes. And certainly we know that is much more likely to lead to homes being damp because people are trying to dry clothes and all those sorts of issues that go with it, and huge pressures because of that. So in Oxford, we're trying to tackle our affordability problem through being ambitious with our local plan policies, investing in our own housing stock. We are building a lot of council homes. We still have about 7,500 council houses in Oxford, as well as there are also other social housing, but we are building more, and we are also including improving energy efficiency in the homes that we have. And we are directly delivering high quality, affordable and energy efficient homes through our wholly owned housing company. So we've set up a housing company and are building houses. And as I said, in a city where more than half the population rent their homes, we are also taking action to improve the quality of rented homes. So rising to the challenge in a slightly different way to, I think, the way Lord Best was describing, we are the only place in the country to have a borough-wide private rented licensing scheme, which has the aim to drive up standards in the private rented sector. We've been doing this with houses in multiple occupation for some time, and we were successful in putting a bid into government to expand it to the entire private rented sector. That came in just this September, so we'll see how that goes, but we are determined that people who are living in the private rented sector should have homes which are decent homes. Lord Best didn't quite get to the bit about transport, but we need to fundamentally change the way that we travel and move around our city, not only to meet our commitment to be a zero carbon city by 2040 and also to deal with our gridlocked transport network, but also because of the health benefits of cleaner air and safer, more active travel. Our local plan policies promote low car developments, more cycling and walking. The City Council isn't a transport authority, but we have championed the need for a long-term cohesive strategy for reducing congestion, improving public transport and active travel. The County Council are now progressing with plans for a zero emission zone, a workplace parking levy and bus traffic filters. None of these are easy, and it is vitally important that we get these right. And we're working hard to influence our county colleagues to engage with local residents and businesses to improve understanding of their proposals. Lastly, I also agree with the Commission's findings that more recognition and funding of preventative health measures would not only deliver great health benefits, but also huge savings to the NHS. We see those benefits locally in our work with our communities to encourage and support active and healthy living. Our physical activity programmes are aimed at all different ages and stages of life. We subsidise access to our leisure centres for those in receipts of benefits. We have free membership for homeless people, and we offer free swimming lessons for under 16s and free swimming for under 18s. We are working with our partners to promote access to healthy food and cooking skills. Social prescribing could make a real difference, but it does need to be scaled up. We need greater coordination across health, public health, and putting real intent and real funding behind prevention is still needed. With further reductions to public spending looming, this will be more important, but I fear more challenging than ever. So the report of the Commission is timely, and it is a welcome contribution to all partners working to create a healthy city in Oxford. And I hope that national policymakers will sit up and take notice as well. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Really fascinating examples of what's happening here locally to address the Healthy Cities agenda. I wonder if I could open it up now to the floor. I'm sure there are lots of questions and lots of thought-provoking presentations there. So are there any questions from the floor? Yeah.
Hi. I was actually at the launch event as well, so it's great to see how it's now being applied to, well, my city in a local context. I'm interested in knowing how much the report has kind of recognised and addressed the often very different needs of people with disabilities, many of whom can't use certain forms of active transport, many of whom have greater barriers to accessing even nearby facilities, and who may need to use less environmentally friendly methods while at the same time, the city moves away from that. So how has that been factored in?
Well, absolutely. Investment that makes life easier for people with disabilities, because it's the environment getting in the way. It's the barriers that the physical environment put up that make people with a disability so disadvantaged. We do quite a little bit about trying to ensure that every new home meets what we used to call lifetime home standards. That they're not just visitable. You can visit in a wheelchair, but you can actually live there, make that your home, and move. Yes, indeed, visit your neighbours. But government has done something quite good. This one has got under the net before other things may happen. What government has said is that they are going to reform Part M, which is the accessibility part of the building regulations, and Part M4 brackets 2. So we get the M42 here. I can't quite remember why, but government has decided that the new standard will be at a level, the new standard of accessibility that will be required of all new building will be at a level that does enable a wheelchair to get in through the front door, to get out through the back door. That wasn't a requirement before, to move around inside. And people with all kinds of disabilities, sometimes temporary ones. You break your teenage son breaks a leg. How's the household going to operate when little Johnny is incapacitated for a while? Answer: you'll be okay if it's a lifetime home, if it's a home that now complies with the new Part M42. So a bit of slightly, no, I mustn't say I was surprised. It's been a long time coming, let's say that. We've been campaigning for there to be better accessibility, to make all homes, make it a universal. But just a little sting in the tail is that all those house builders with planning consents already don't have to change. And they haven't yet built thousands, in fact, more or less hundreds of thousands of homes for which planning consents already available. They've put the scheme in so they can do them. And they, of course, I mustn't be too unkind, but it's unlikely that they will upgrade as they should. And they'll only do that when they have to for new planning consents. But at least we're nearly there. We've made some progress on behalf of people with disabilities. Anybody else want to?
If I may.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't sure whether you were particularly referring to sort of transport policies as well, and just to sort of reassure a bit on that in front locally. We as a city, long time since, set up a specific forum to engage with different groups who might have more difficulty accessing public transport and who might have specific needs. And we have very much fed in the views of that group to the transport policies of the county. And I'm glad to say that certainly the current proposals that are being consulted on as we speak now have got measures in them which are designed specifically to help people with disabilities to get around. And in fact, obviously the reduction of congestion more generally means that those people who do need to be on the roads in private vehicles should be able to get around more easily. And there are exemptions proposed for the bus priority gates for anybody who is registered disabled. So I think actually there are some real improvements there. We've also been quite lucky in Oxford, well, it's not luck actually, it's deliberate policy. We've worked with the bus companies over many, many years to make sure that our buses are accessible, and they were accessible from, have been for 20, 30 years now to wheelchairs, and obviously that also makes them accessible to pushchairs and so on. So actually lots of people are able to use buses, but I appreciate that still isn't the case for absolutely everybody. I think there's more though that needs to be done, in particular in relation to cars for people who've got disabilities and supporting people to convert to electric cars, because that would save people money in the long run in terms of fuel costs, but obviously for issues like air quality, I think that's really important, and obviously part of the air quality is for people inside the car. I mean, actually, a lot of the pollution caused by cars is going to the people who are actually inside the car, as well as those people who are living on the street or walking past.
Thanks. It's a really good question. It's absolutely vital that when changes are being made to neighbourhoods, for instance, introducing low traffic areas, that everyone is asked their views. It's much harder and more expensive, more time consuming to make sure that absolutely everybody is listened to, but it's really important. And it's great to hear what's going on here. But this is a problem being faced by cities all around the world. And there are lots of innovative solutions coming forward, and there's a lot we can learn from other places. I visited Oslo shortly before the pandemic, and they had done a lot of work to make the centre of Oslo as car-free as possible, and they did it very, very quickly as well. And they've done it by reducing the car parking spaces. But that does mean that if somebody who's less mobile needs to go into the city, they can be dropped off in the city and they can be collected from the city centre, but people can't drive there and park. I think there are some parking spaces, but it means for everybody else, getting into the city centre, it's much easier and more pleasant to walk or to cycle. And because there's so much less traffic, for those people who do need to use vehicles, it's much quicker and easier. So there's a lot we can learn from other places as well, because everywhere around the world has got exactly the same problem.
Any other questions?
Just relating to that last point about transport and traffic and engagement with the public, it's a big issue in the city here in Oxford at the moment with the introduction of low traffic neighbourhoods. And certainly though many of those who oppose LTNs regard perhaps forums like this as people dictating how they should live their lives. And I think there's a real problem there in that because we've engineered, if you like, our cities for the motor car for many years, to actually change that and get more active travel and more people using public transport, particularly in a constricted city like Oxford, it means actually, people are going to have to drive further in order to create the space for walking, cycling and public transport. But I don't think that argument has been won with many of the public. And there's a common view out there that I've seen that is that there should more or less be a vote on this. And the result of that vote, I think, would be, well, we want to drive our cars down every street because that's what we've engineered, a situation where we have mass car use. And so I think there's some sort of democratic problem there. The idea, the thing I see on social media most often is, well, it's not proper consultation because if we had a vote on it, in fact there was a vote and a majority didn't want it. Well, the thing is, you can't make a change like this on the basis of people voting to use their cars. So I think there's a real problem there that Oxford is currently grappling with.
Do you want to come back?
Shall I come back on that one? Well, I agree largely with what you're saying, which is that I think we have got a real democratic issue here, and it's a bit of a conundrum as to how we engage people with these issues. And I'll be blunt, I don't think it's been handled as well as it should have been. And I can say that because it's not my council that's doing it. But I think we actually argued quite strongly with the county about the low traffic neighbourhoods and the way, particularly the most recent one was imposed. We it's not a secret. I was quite public about it, so that we didn't think it should have been brought in the way it was, and at the time it was, and we were concerned about the impact it would have on bus travel in particular. And I'm afraid to say I think we've been right on that front. We are in favour of the concept of low traffic neighbourhoods, because who wants to live in a high traffic neighbourhood? Literally nobody. And I think that is one of the problems that we have with this whole concept of low traffic neighbourhoods, is nobody wants to live in a high traffic neighbourhood. Everyone wants everyone's against rat running on their street, but everyone wants to be able to well, not everybody, but a lot of people want to be able to rat run on somebody else's. And that is the conundrum that we all have to face. But having said all of that, we have had a whole series of local elections since we have had the introduction of low traffic neighbourhoods in Oxford. There were people who stood on a specific platform against low traffic neighbourhoods, and with one exception, they did not win seats, and people who had stood on party political platforms which were supportive of low traffic neighbourhoods and the transport proposals won in every other seat in the city. So I think there is a lot of noise from a lot of people who are very anti these measures, but actually we have falling car ownership in the city. We have increasing numbers of people who are walking and cycling and using public transport. And I think as well, if you talk to people, and I do on a very regular basis, and you say to them, well, you do recognise we have a problem with congestion, and you do recognise that we do need to speed up buses and make it more attractive for people to get the bus. People agree with those concepts, and then you can start having a conversation. My regret is that it's really difficult to have all of those conversations with all of the people that we need to have it in a sort of timely and adequate way. I would rather we were taking people with us on this difficult transport journey than imposing it on people. But I also understand from the county's perspective the urgency of doing some of this work, and frankly, from an air quality perspective and a health perspective, I think it is pretty urgent.
We did a project to look at 20-minute neighbourhoods and what places around the world who've been doing that for years had learnt. And we spoke to Paris and Melbourne and Oregon in the States. They've been trying to introduce 20-minute neighbourhoods for some time, the idea being that most people, for most days, could find what they needed within a short walk or cycle. And what we learnt from talking to those other cities was that having really good political leadership was absolutely vital, but also being able to express a positive vision for the future. So it's not about you can't do this, you can't drive, we're going to make life difficult for you. It can be about saying, look what we could do if we transform this space, if we turn this car park into a beautiful green space with play equipment or whatever. There are so many positives that can be achieved. And again, in lots of places around the world, once things start to happen, once people see how the city can be transformed for the better with one or two examples, that can really start to change people's perceptions. So I think turning the conversation around from we don't want you to do this to we would love you to be able to experience a better city, a greener city, can be really helpful. And having really good data, because in many places, a lot of people don't have cars anyway. Yeah. So I live in a low traffic neighbourhood, very contentious, but where I live, actually very few people have cars. So it is a noisy minority sometimes that are making the fuss.
Me too. Yes. Just a few thoughts. My local city is York. I live in Yorkshire, and York now has extensive pedestrianised, traffic-free areas. Everybody, there was loads of moaning about all of this. Nobody wants to go back.
Yeah, that's right.
If you can only get this done and then ask the question, what do you think about this? The answer is we don't want to go back. So the proof is in the end in the eating. Electric cars. People say, well, when cars are electric, there won't be any pollution. All will be well. First of all, it's going to take about nearly 50 years before the last vehicle that is, and that's if we get on with it. Which at the moment, we're doing this quite slowly. It's going to take a long time to do. But 45% of the harmful particulates that come out of cars come from brakes and tyres. Those produce nasty things, not least for the people in the vehicles themselves. I think it was Edinburgh that had the big vote. It was very sad. They wanted to have a congestion area, congestion zone, with a congestion charge, and it was voted against. When they analysed the figures subsequently, the people who voted against the congestion zone came from outside of it, in the suburbs. The people who actually were affected because they were in the zone voted in favour. And you've got to think whose vote should count for more: those who come passing through, or those who live there and have got to breathe in that pollution on a daily basis for the lives of their small children. So yeah, absolutely, we're as one.
I know there are lots of questions in the room. We're sort of running out of time, and I wonder if we could all move towards the back of the room and carry on the conversation over a drink. But I just would like, before we do that, just to thank our 4 speakers very much for really fascinating presentations and discussion. And in fact, there are links between what you were saying about opening up democracy and really communicating and engaging with the public with our next public seminar, which is in week 8, which is reporting on Street Voice, which is the citizens' jury that we were involved in at GCHU here in Oxford, addressing issues around climate, health and transport. You'll find details on our website, and we'll be reporting on that whole project with speakers, similar format, week 8 of Michaelmas. That's the 30th of November. So do come along and join us to continue the conversation about engaging with the public around these very contentious issues. So if you could join me in thanking the 4 speakers and do help yourself to the